Assalamu alaikum and good evening. Despite the expectations, Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif announced to give peace one more chance. Now, Prime Minister supported talks as the best way to end the years of fighting with the militants in the country. But this move is being considered a fresh bid to give these militants another chance to come to the negotiating table. Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif set up a 4-member committee to oversee the peace process and overcoming the speculation of an imminent military operation against these banned militant groups. Now, since the other side has shown intent to negotiate, we also wish to give peace yet another chance. The opposition in the National Assembly has voiced its support for Nawaz Sharif's initiatives to offer peace talks to militants, hoping for restoration of peace in Pakistan. But some factors are questionable here. Why there is no time frame set for these talks to be held? What would be the authority of 4-member committee on negotiating on the table? Who can assure that CIA drones will not hit these peace talks process again as they did previously? Who will assure that militants will observe a ceasefire during the peace talk process? What is the stance of Pak Army on this situation? Today we will be discussing the aspects of expected peace talks and their future. We will also try to analyze the Pak-Afghan conditions after the evacuations of NATO forces. As you know, viewers, in my show, Mr. Zaid Hamid joins me. Assalamu alaikum, Mr. Zaid Hamid. As you know that we have a big question standing in front of us, which is the evacuation of NATO forces from Afghanistan. And the bigger question in Pakistan is whether the peace talks will survive this time after another announcement from Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif in the session of National Assembly. Before we start our discussion, Mr. Zaid Hamid, we have put together a report about the NATO forces evacuation from Afghanistan, and then we would like to analyze it in the broader spectrum, whether this new offer of peace talks with militants will survive or not. Let's have a look at that report first.
NATO forces withdrawal from Afghanistan. NATO forces will leave Afghanistan by the end of December 2014. The mammoth logistical operation to withdraw by land, sea and air is well underway, and ongoing British forces aim to have sent back more than 3,000 vehicles or items of equipment, including aircraft such as helicopters, and more than 5,000 containers of material to the UK by the end of 2014. The US has shifted about 300,000 tons of equipment, but like the UK, not everything will be coming back. The 3 main routes for withdrawal are by air, flights back to the UK, or to intermediate ports in the Gulf and Mediterranean, where the journey will continue by ship. By road, south. The route through Pakistan to the port Karachi is the easiest, but has been subjected to delays and closures. By the road and rail, north. The northern distribution network carries convoys, train loads and personal carriers and heavy vehicles through Uzbekistan and Kazakhstan to Georgia, or on through Russia to Latvia. The cost for the US withdrawal is estimated at between $5 billion and $7 billion. If the US lost the use of the Pakistan route, it would cost hundreds of millions of dollars to take the kit out by other means. Currently, the US is shipping about 3% of its cargo through the northern Central Asia routes. This compares with about 42% via Pakistan. There are currently about 57,000 ISAF troops in Afghanistan, more than half of which are American. The UK has about 5,200 remaining from a peak of about 10,000 in 2011. A bilateral security agreement between Afghanistan and the US setting out the framework for the US troops after 2014 remain unsigned.
Yes, Mr. Zaid, Hamid, as you saw our report, as you see, Pakistan is facing two battles. One battle is within Pakistan between Taliban, the militants, and our government, and the other battle is outside Pakistan that we are facing through US and India, and as you always say, CIA and RAW. So if we start from the battle within Pakistan, and if we start from analyzing the recent development by Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif announcing in the 8th session of the National Assembly that let's give peace one more chance, and he has established this new 4-member committee. So what do you see? How is this government going to be more confident in having peace talks with Taliban this time?
You see, the decision of the Pakistani Prime Minister to give time and space to the TTP, CIA-backed, RAW-backed insurgents, to give them one more chance, is one of the greatest blunders in our military history. There is absolutely no doubt about this. If Pakistan, God forbid, would be destroyed, it would be destroyed because of this insanity by the Pakistani Prime Minister, who's a coward actually, unfortunately. He does not have the guts to go into war. He's a Prime Minister who's being forced to go into war because the time, the environment, the circumstances require it. And he doesn't have the backbone to stand for it. And what he has done is, let me give you the background. Why has he said this now? The fact is that just about a couple of weeks ago, Pakistan Air Force had launched a blitzkrieg, a back-breaking strike on the lines of the TTP CIA-backed terrorists in North Waziristan. Over 100 hardcore terrorists and some of the almost the 7 top military commanders which were trained by CIA and RAW were killed in those airstrikes, and then the gunship helicopters followed for the coup de grace. So
trained by CIA or RAW or trained by TTP?
You see, the commanders and the TTP itself are trained by CIA and RAW. TTP is an extension of the CIA's foreign policy of destabilizing Pakistan through insurgency, subversion and sabotage. Just like they are doing through Free Syrian Army, they are demolishing the state of Syria, supporting militant insurgent groups. They've been doing it in South America, they've been doing it all over the world in every part of the CIA's clandestine operations, and TTP is one of those. And now when the Pakistan army had broken their back, especially in winters when TTP is dug into the North Waziristan and cannot fall back into Afghanistan and cannot fight on the mountains in the open because of the snow and the coldest temperatures which are there, this was the time when you have struck them hard, you roll in the ground troops, mop up the area and clean them up. And this is where the TTP begged for peace. Basically, the peace means give us 2 months of breathing space where we can, the weather will get warmer, they'll get a regrouping time, reorganizing time, they'll fall back into Afghanistan, and then they'll come back to fight another day.
So this offer of peace talks over and over again in the last couple of days from Taliban is due to this. What you're trying to say is that they're using the peace talks as a cover to be safe from the military operations?
This is precisely what they are doing. This is a trap they have set for Pakistan. This is a trap they have set for Pakistani government. Army is against it. Army is fiercely angry, absolutely outraged at this blasphemy and military blasphemy that the government is doing by asking the army to hold back at a moment when we could have crushed the TTP insurgency.
So what you're saying is that there's a divide between army and the government officials on this decision of giving peace one more chance? They both are not on the same frequency level?
Army officer I have talked to, from a second lieutenant to serving generals to the ISI undercover officers, everybody is furious. Everybody said, we got them. We hit them so hard in North Waziristan. Some of the finest frontline commanders, especially the Uzbeks, who were trained by, who were actually the CIA front troop attack dogs.
Let me ask you this first, Mr. Zaid Hamid. Who are these Uzbeks? What are they doing in Pakistan? And what is their problem with Pakistan?
You see, this is something which you must understand, because so many times the disinformation in the media has been coming out that these are the Uzbeks of the Islamic Party of Uzbekistan. Rubbish, absolute nonsense. These are the Uzbeks, the frontline attack dogs which belong to the forces of Abdul Rashid Dostum in Afghanistan, the so-called Northern Alliance. Abdul Rashid Dostum is a pro-CIA, was always pro-Soviets in the Soviet era war. He was pro-Soviet. He's a communist, Marxist, a butcher of Northern Afghanistan. He was the one responsible for massacring thousands of Taliban prisoners in the containers, suffocating them to death. He has a militia called Gilam Jam or Uzbek militia that he has. And he has, through the Afghan intelligence, Rama and Afghan army, some of his troops have come into, because they are basically the backers of TTP, his frontline troops have come into Pakistani Pashtun areas. Otherwise, historically, it's not possible that Muslims from Uzbekistan will cross Afghanistan and come into Pashtun areas of Pakistani tribal areas and fight against Pakistan. Doesn't make sense. Insanity. They won't do that. If Uzbeks in Central Asia has to come, they'll fight the Americans alongside the Afghan Taliban. But here you find a band of about 300-400 Uzbeks. Every time their supplies keep on coming. Whenever you kill few of them, some more come from Afghanistan side. They are all Abdul Rashid Dostum's troops. They are not from the Islamic Party of Afghanistan. And Abdul Rashid Dostum is a CIA raw asset.
Abdul Rashid, that's what I wanted to know, that what's his problem with Pakistan?
You see,
if he's in Afghanistan, he should be fighting against US.
You see the point, that's what I'm saying. If you look at the history of post 9/11 scenario, Americans came into Afghanistan riding on the backs of three groups. One was Tajiks, other were Uzbeks, other were Hazaras. And Uzbek leader was Abdul Rashid Dostum, the butcher of Mazar Sharif. And the man, if you just Google his history, from the Soviet era days, he was a Soviet communist Marxist warlord. Then he changed sides. First he was with the communists, butchering the Afghan Muslims. Then he changed sides, joined Ahmad Shah Massoud because Dostum got angry with Najibullah, overthrew Najibullah, grabbed power in Kabul. But when the Americans came, he sided with the Americans. He is for sale. He's a warlord, he's a mercenary, and his forces are operating.
That's another factor adding in the list of Taliban. We have already Punjabi Taliban on board. We have Tehrik-e-Taliban Pakistan on board. Now we have these Uzbeks on board. And then we have another one, Al-Hafza, by the name of Al-Hafza.
In this airstrike that took place a couple of weeks back, the frontline Uzbek troops were killed. All the Uzbek fighters were killed. And that has broken the back of the TTP, because the frontline fighters, which were actually, as we said, the Afghan Uzbeks, backed and funded by the Afghan National Army and Rama, their intelligence secret service, they were sent in from this side. So what we are saying is, now after that, TTP started to sue for peace. And all they need is 2 months' time. They'll regroup, reorganize. And the committee, which has been formed by the Prime Minister,
four members
have absolutely no clout on the TTP. Have absolutely no clout. TTP does not respect them, does not honor them, and they have absolute no control.
They say that Major Muhammad Amir, Taliban respects his brother Maulana Tayyib. And then we have Irfan Siddiqui on board, who's an advisor to Prime Minister on national affairs. Then we have Rahimullah Yusuf Zaid, a very prominent journalist. And then we have former Ambassador Rustam Shah Mohammad. So in this committee, what do you think? Will these four people be able to create a communication between Taliban and government?
You see, as long as the TTP needs time, the breathing space, Taliban will engage them. Delegations will come from both sides. But once the Taliban feel they have got enough time and space now, they have regrouped, reorganized, and are ready to relaunch again, the throats of these four people will be slit by the Taliban themselves. I'm telling you now. Just Colonel Imam and Khalid Khwaja were two men of the same stature as these four men that you have just mentioned. They went in for the peace talks as well, and Taliban slit their throats.
But you're saying that all they need is 2 months' time, and that's why we are hearing these peace offers from their end. And so let's suppose that peace offer does give them 2 months' time, and they do get reorganized, do get re-equipped. But then just like this time when our army can do a military airstrike and get rid of all of them, after 2 months, won't our army be able to do the same task?
You see, that's not the point. The point is, giving you an example of Second World War, when the German army entered France and overran it, the entire British army was cornered on the Dunkirk beach. Hundreds of thousands of British troops were cornered. Behind were Germans, front was ocean. And if the Germans had just pushed on, the entire British army would have been destroyed in the early months of the Second World War. The World War would have finished much earlier. England would have fallen. But the German army stopped. For some inexplicable reason, Hitler did not allow. At that critical moment when the British army were exposed, sitting on the beaches and the shores, waiting to be rescued, with no weapons, no armory, no artillery, no air support, and entire German army was after them, he stopped the German army and allowed only sent in the Luftwaffe, the air power. See, the fact is, and the entire British army was rescued to fight another day. And this is what is happening. Air power can only soften up the enemy. Mopping up, clearing up, elimination has to be done by the ground forces.
And we won't be able to do that.
And this is what the Prime Minister is doing. He's stopping the ground forces from moving in when we have broken the back of the TTP in winters, when their TTP is the most vulnerable. And this is, I'm saying, a blunder of mega proportions for which thousands of Pakistani lives will be lost later when TTP will be reorganized, regrouped, and re-weaponized, rearmed, and then they'll
come back with a better,
and they'll come back with a vengeance.
We will talk on this more. We have to take a break here. After the break, when we come back, we will explore more on this aspect, that why this peace offer has been launched on board again, and what would be the consequences, or what would be the aspects that will come out as a result of this. Stay with us. We'll be right back after a short break. Welcome back, viewers. We're talking on the new recent development of the offer of peace talks from the Prime Minister of Pakistan with the Taliban. What would be the time frame that is not being exposed, that is not being informed to the Pakistani people? How much time do they need to start or initiate these peace talks? What would be the time frame to proceed with them? And then at the same time, what is the outside battle from Pakistan? What are who are the participants who are performing in the outside battle of Pakistan, in which U.S. is one of the main factors? Let's see what does Obama has to say on the two major aspects, which is one, evacuation, and the second, drones. And then we will connect those two aspects with the conditions inside Pakistan. Mr. Zaid, Hamid, let's have a look at the Obama statement, and then we will get back to our discussion.
After 2014, we will support a unified Afghanistan as it takes responsibility for its own future. If the Afghan government signs a security agreement that we have negotiated, a small force of Americans could remain in Afghanistan with NATO allies. Al-Qaeda's core leadership on a path to defeat the threat has evolved as Al-Qaeda affiliates and other extremists take root in different parts of the world. In Yemen, Somalia, Iraq, Mali, we have to keep working with partners to disrupt and disable those networks. So even as we actively and aggressively pursue terrorist networks, through more targeted efforts and by building the capacity of our foreign partners, America must move off a permanent war footing. That's why I've imposed prudent limits on the use of drones. For we will not be safer if people abroad believe we strike within their countries without regard for the consequence.
Yes, Mr. Zaid Hamid, as you saw Obama mentioning Yemen and then Somalia, Mali, Iraq, and saying that now they have decided not to have permanent troops in any of the partner countries. And he has just mentioned that, you know, from Afghanistan, seems like that they have to leave. But what do you have to say? Karzai has said that he would not sign any security agreement unless and until U.S. and Pakistan succeed in the peace talks with Taliban.
About Obama, I could only say how compulsive this liar is. God, I mean, it really stuns you, how audacity of him to lie such blatantly. They create Al-Qaeda, so-called Al-Qaeda. They fund it, they support it, they patronize it, they back it. They are doing it everywhere, wherever all the countries that he has named. In Syria, the so-called Al-Qaeda is funded, supported, and backed by CIA.
He's saying that he's in all these partner countries to destroy terrorists.
See, this is what the point is. That for them, when they use the term terrorists, it's not Al-Qaeda they mean. They mean Muslim countries, Muslim nations, Muslim states. The axis of evil did not consist of Al-Qaeda. The axis of evil, which he had defined earlier, his father Bush had defined earlier, consisted of Muslim lands. Syria, Iraq, Pakistan, and all these countries. So the point is, what they are doing in Afghanistan for the last 13 years, what objective has he achieved? Has he destroyed Afghan Taliban? No. Has he destroyed the so-called Al-Qaeda network in Afghanistan? No. In fact, they are protected, patronized, developed them more. Has he kept the Afghanistan united? No. There's a war going on in Afghanistan at the moment which has cost almost 250,000 lives. And he has totally destabilized Pakistan through that presence in Afghanistan. So what benefit is it to Pakistan, the American presence?
But he has killed Osama. They claim that
they
have
Again,
crushed Al-Qaeda. See, it's no longer stronger anymore.
The Al-Qaeda is a religious ideology of takfir. Takfiri militants today which are devastating Pakistan are now funded, backed and supported by CIA. This is exactly what we are telling you here. The TTP is based in Afghanistan. Mullah Fazlullah, the head of TTP, travels on Afghan passports. That insane cutthroat. He is protected by the CIA and Afghan National Army and Karzai government. So what Al-Qaeda is he talking about? The Takfiri mindset, which believes that every Muslim is a heretic and should be eliminated ruthlessly. The suicide bombing, the car bombing, the attacks on the Pakistani armed forces, the war of annihilation which is going on against Pakistan is backed by Obama himself. And drones is one axis of it. They are supporting insurgency in Balochistan.
But about drones, he now understands that, okay, the drone attacks won't be as frequent as they have been using.
You see, what has happened is the NATO supplies through Pakistan have been choked. And almost $30 billion worth of NATO hardware is now stuck in Afghanistan, which they wanted to take out through Pakistan, and they cannot. And they'll have to chop it up into junk rubbish. They'll have to destroy it actually, because there's no takers for it. Now, this is what the problem is. That's why he's holding back on the drone campaign temporarily. Again, as we said, they only want to gain time so that the temperature in Pakistan can calm down a bit, supplies can open again, and once the supplies go through and they have no presence or limited presence in Afghanistan, everything will start all over again. This is what we are telling you. Even Obama is trying to gain time. Because why does he want to keep a presence in Afghanistan? Explain to me that. If he wants peace in Afghanistan, why cannot we have a Muslim peacekeeping force? A peacekeeping force from Pakistan, Iran, Turkey, Malaysia, Bangladesh and Saudi Arabia. If Afghanistan has to be kept at peace, and this is in fact the idea that Pakistan must promote now. A Muslim peacekeeping force in Afghanistan. Americans must be thrown out in total. They don't speak Pashto, they don't speak Farsi, they don't have Afghan passports. They got no business to be in Afghanistan, and they have destroyed Pakistan.
But do you think that if US leaves from Afghanistan completely, Afghanistan would be able to tackle its problems as its own?
Now what is happening? Please try to understand. There are two types of wars in Afghanistan that we have seen in history. One is a war against foreign occupation forces. That is always bloody, that's always messy, that always destroys the entire region. First the Soviets came, and now the Americans. And then once the foreign occupation forces leave, Afghans have a habit of fighting within each other in a civil war, in a power struggle. And that war always remains local. It's a war between different ethnic groups, remains local. Both wars are bad, but which war is more devastating, more bloody for the entire region? It's the war against the foreign occupation forces. So the first priority is to bring down temperatures in Afghanistan throughout the foreign occupation forces. That will not just bring down the temperatures in Afghanistan, will also eliminate the entire war against Pakistan. This is something, it doesn't take rocket scientists to figure this out. You evacuate, you throw out Americans and Indians from Afghanistan. Entire insurgency against Pakistan will come to a stop, even if there is a local civil war going on in Afghanistan between Afghan ethnic groups. Well, and that can be managed through a Muslim peacekeeping force.
We will continue our discussion from right here, Mr. Zaid Hamid, because there's a lot of connections that what happens in Afghanistan influences directly Pakistan, and what happens in Pakistan influences Afghanistan as well. So how to resolve problems in these two countries, that's what we want to know. And that's why we started our show saying that there is one battle within Pakistan and one outside. We will continue our discussion. Viewers, stay with us. We'll be right back after a short break. Welcome back, viewers. We are analyzing what's happening in Afghanistan and what's happening in Pakistan, since both the countries are interconnected with each other. What happens in one influences the other. And what does US and India has to do with these two countries? Who is behind all the terrorist attacks in Pakistan, and how is our government handling it? Is the government in the right direction this time? Are they really serious about having peace talks and pursuing this direction again? What's the time frame? Will they be successful? The committee established by our government, how effective is that? What authorities will that committee be having? Mr. Zaid Hamid, before we come back to the internal battle, we would like to still know that why would Karzai put a condition? I asked you earlier also, why would he put a condition? What is he trying to gain out of this by connecting Pakistan and US having peace talks first with Taliban? Do you think that the announcement that Prime Minister did just a day before in the National Assembly session has something to do with that demand from Karzai in Afghanistan?
You see, it's not possible that Karzai can force Pakistan government to have peace talks with Pakistani insurgents. Karzai can ask Pakistan and Americans to give guarantee that Afghan Taliban will let him live, because as the circumstances are building up, as the new presidential elections are also coming up in Afghanistan, Karzai has no future. He has been discredited. He is almost a mayor of Kabul. He rules a country which he does not control. He can't even go out in suburbs of Kabul. And he is sure that he will be assassinated, eliminated, just like Najibullah during the time of Soviets was killed by Taliban once Taliban captured Kabul. So, just like the Americans want a guarantee that once their forces remain in Afghanistan, they will not be prosecuted by the next government which will come into power. That's the agreement that they want Karzai to sign, and Karzai cannot sign it because that would be a death warrant for him. Because people of Afghanistan will lynch him alive if he signs this kind of an agreement which gives a blanket cover and protection to the Americans to do whatever they want in Afghanistan, total immunity.
But then Mr. Zaid, Hamid, when the elections would happen, Karzai won't be there anymore.
No, he won't.
So that aggrement would go down the drain anyway.
See, the point is
so
Americans
what's the point
want
of having this agreement done?
Americans want. This is what the problem is. The terms of the agreements are such, no matter who signs it, Karzai signs it today, that the next government will be binding to enforce it. And this is, of course, the next government.
But if the Taliban government comes in, let's suppose that after Karzai, if the Taliban government comes in, you think that they would have to follow any kind of agreement?
See, the point is, if the Taliban
today?
government comes in, they will not let American troops stay in Afghanistan. They have defeated the main force of the Americans and the NATO. How would Taliban allow few bases of the Americans and NATO spread all over the country? That will not happen. Then if the major force of the Americans have not been able to contain Afghan Taliban in the last 13 years, how do Americans expect that Afghan Taliban will allow them to live in Afghanistan after the bulk forces are withdrawn? It's impossible. It's not happening. Afghan Taliban will butcher each one of them if they get their hands on to the Americans or the foreign forces. So they know it. If the agreement is not signed, which gives a blanket immunity to the Americans.
But then isn't it either way, whether the agreement gets signed or it does not get signed? If the Taliban government comes, that agreement will be signed
anyway. If the agreement is signed, then the Americans will use their military force to make sure that the Taliban are kept out of Kabul. See, this is the problem. And to use that, Americans will have to use indiscriminate, ruthless force. And for that, lots of civilian casualties would come. And that's why Americans want this blanket immunity. And so it's a very difficult situation. So solution is only one, which we are telling you, is that Pakistan should take a very strong initiative now with the Muslim countries in the region and launch the concept of a Muslim peacekeeping force, which Afghans would accept, all segments of Afghan would accept. If anybody has a problem with Pakistan, other factions do not have a problem with Turkey or Iran or Saudi Arabia or Bangladesh or Malaysia. And
but
once
Mr.
the Muslim forces
Hamid,
are in
one thing, why isn't Pakistan understanding this to have a grand alliance with a neighboring country when even Afghanistan is already following into the footsteps of having an alliance with India? Karzai is following into the footsteps of having an alliance with India. So if Indian influence is there, and you know, we are seeing more Indian influence in Afghanistan, how will that be affecting Pakistan later?
You see, this is the most unfortunate part, and this is the reason why we are saying crush the TTP now when they are the weakest. Because in India, a Hitler is coming to power in the next few months. And once Hitler comes into power in India, we know, like in Europe, once Hitler came into power, we knew what happened next. It was a world war. And when a fascist, Zionist, Nazi party of BJP and Narendra Modi comes into power in India, they are aggressively going to get involved in Afghanistan, support the insurgencies and rebellions, and completely encircle Pakistan from two sides. We will be crushed from three axes, east, west, and the center. And this is the reason we are insisting now, no peace deals, for God's sake. Crush the TTP, which are the barking dogs of the Indian intelligence. They must be eliminated now when they're the weakest. And throw the Americans out, bring in a Muslim peacekeeping force in Afghanistan, which will annihilate completely the Indian influence in Afghanistan. I would like you to show a video here by one of the finest Indians that they have, Miss Arundhati Roy. And she has spoken. She's a Hindu, she's an Indian, she's a thinker, she's an intellectual. And she has spoken against Narendra Modi and exposed the reality of that fascist party which is taking over India now in the next few months. I would request you to show that here now.
We will have a look at that. Arundhati Roy, what does she have to say, like you mentioned, and then we will start our discussion because there are a lot of questions that raise once you listen to that video. Let's have a look at that.
And now there's a campaign for the free speech of Narendra Modi, but I just want to tell you who this man is. He was a member of an organization called the RSS, which is the Rashtriya Swayamsevak Sangh, which was set up in 1927, inspired by the fascists in Italy, inspired by Mussolini. One of their greatest heroes is Adolf Hitler. They very openly praise Adolf Hitler. In 2002, when Modi was the chief minister, a train full of pilgrims coming back from the destruction of this Ayodhya mosque, which was disputed. The train caught fire. Nobody knows who set fire to the train, and 57 pilgrims were burnt. In reaction to that, under his watch, right-wing Hindu mobs went crazy in Gujarat. They burnt and killed and raped, and something like between 1,000 and 2,000 Muslims were massacred openly on the streets of Gujarat. 100,000 people were driven from their homes. The people who did the killing were helped by the police.
Yes, Mr. Zaid Hamid, as you saw that from Arundhati Roy, no doubt is there that Narendra Modi is the most vicious person against Muslims, and it's all clear now. So Pakistan has Narendra Modi waiting also in one way as a threat. So what do you have to say? What should be done now to face all these threats that we are having?
You see, this is precisely the reason why I'm so aggressively promoting that we must eliminate the threat from our Western axis. All the hostile forces in Afghanistan and which are being sent in from Afghanistan must be eliminated now before this animal Narendra Modi comes to power in India. Because
but I happened to interview just yesterday with the former Prime Minister of Afghanistan and Ahmed Zaid, and he said that Karzai stands nowhere in Afghanistan, and when the elections would happen, those elections would be of no importance in Afghanistan, and the Taliban government would kick out all the Indian influence as well from Afghanistan. So why should we be so threatened from India at this point? Shouldn't we be more concerned about the battle within Pakistan that we are facing from Taliban?
One of the greatest philosophers of the 20th century was Allama Muhammad Iqbal, Dr. Iqbal, who was read by rulers and leaders globally. And Allama Iqbal, he had a beautiful narrative about what Afghanistan, the importance of Afghanistan in the Central Asian heartland. He said, if there is war in Afghanistan, you will see the entire Asia being destabilized. If you want the entire Asia to be stabilized, make sure there is peace in Afghanistan. Afghanistan is the heart of Asia. And if you understand the geography, the history, the sociology, the politics of the entire region, you will understand what Allama Iqbal actually meant and said. Entire violence in Pakistan is not domestic. There are domestic players, yes, but they cannot operate without support, assistance, and logistics from Afghanistan. And from Afghanistan, there are two forces which are operating against Pakistan, the CIA and the RAW in tandem. And these two forces, once the Taliban, the Pashtuns, once they were in power in Afghanistan between 1996 and 2001, there was no Indian influence in Afghanistan, there was no CIA, there was no hostile foreign influence inside Afghanistan. Entire Pakistan's western borders were secure. There were no insurgency, no violence, no terrorism, not a single Pakistani troop on the Afghan side. And now we have 150,000 troops on their axis, and still Pakistan is collapsing, imploding from within because of insurgencies supported and backed by CIA and RAW. And that's why we have
almost 64 groups of extremist Taliban, and one of the groups, the newly emerged group, is Punjabi Taliban. And on the recent situation of Pakistan peace talk offer, the Punjabi Taliban's Amir Ismatullah Mawia is saying that NATO and America wants to have a final round of fight in North Waziristan, and Pakistan People's Party and ANP wants to throw PMLN in the war. But Prime Minister have saved Pakistan by offering this serious and considerate peace talk offer.
this TTP idiot, why doesn't he, if Americans want Pakistan army to go into North Waziristan against TTP, then on whose orders is TTP attacking Pakistan? He should also explain that also. Who's supporting TTP? Who's giving them weapons and supplies and equipment and communication equipment and explosives? Who's supporting TTP? Everybody, every idiot knows no insurgency of that scale can survive without the backing of foreign forces, foreign secret services. So on whose behest is TTP and BLA attacking Pakistan? He should explain that also. See, the point is, this is the reason we are saying TTP is jubilant. TTP is excited that the Prime Minister has taken the bait. And now, after 2 months, when they are going to reorganize, regroup, they are going to launch with such aggression.
You're saying that they will reorganize, reunite, regroup after 2 months, but the Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan spokesperson Shahidullah Shahid has just said that TTP stands united under the leadership of Fazlullah.
You see, Mullah Fazlullah, let me explain who this is. This Mullah Fazlullah was the one who had taken over Swat Valley. And Pakistan army government had done an agreement with him back then also. But he broke the agreement, waged a bloody insurgency, and then Pakistan army had to be sent in. So haven't we tested this man enough? And this man has an Afghan passport. He travels with the backing of the Afghan National Army and Karzai. He travels to India and Delhi regularly. So this snake, we know he's backed by RAW and CIA and Karzai.
Now,
and why would he negotiate?
You just explained the background of this person, Fazlullah. We all know this. So now we are again in peace talks with them. And then the conditions would be coming in the package of peace talks as well. So what would be your opinion if in the conditions from Taliban's, they ask for 3 Talibans, which are Muslim Khan, Mahmud Khan and Mullah Umar. And all 3 belong to Fazlullah area Swat, and they are very close, considered to be right hands of Fazlullah. So what if Taliban's, they put a condition of these 3 to be free first and then proceed with the peace talks?
You see, the Taliban, this TTP, Tehreek-e-Taliban, Pentagon, they have this is exactly what they have done. They have seen the weakness of the government. The supporters of TTP in Pakistani government and politics, Jamiyat-e-Ulama-e-Islam, JUI, Jamaat-e-Islami, Imran Khan, unfortunately, are absolute insane. That they have not, either they are collaborators and treacherous, or they are useful idiots who are actually doing the bidding for the TTP. What TTP is demanding is, release all our cutthroats, give us back all the areas that the army has captured after giving so many sacrifices, and then, once the tribal areas are handed back to the TTP and all the cadre who are arrested and captured, the cutthroat, the throat slitters, once they are released, then they say we are going to talk with the government. Basically what they are saying is, give us territory back, give us our men back, and then we might talk to you. And then nothing stops them. There's no binding on them. There are no guarantors. And the fact of the matter
is, the same names that you took, the same names have been taken by TTP spokesperson Shahidullah Shahid, saying that Imran Khan, Munawar Hassan, Fazlullah, Samuel Haq, they can play a very important role in these peace talks.
They can play an extremely important role in destroying Pakistan completely and playing into the hands of the CIA and RAW. Of course they are playing extremely important role, but demolishing Pakistan, not protecting. And I'm saying it openly. And when the time comes, you will see this. The whole Pakistani nation will pay. The blood will flow on Pakistani streets and cities if TTP is allowed to survive another few months while the Indian Hitler comes into power in India and the Americans decide to stay back in Afghanistan. Pakistan, this is the mistake which will run into generations. It's a blunder which will cost us another 100,000 lives minimum. And this is something
but Mr. Zaid Hamid,
absolutely upset about this.
When we are seeing that a superpower like US has come down to have peace talks with Taliban after the 12 years of their fights, then why not us? What's wrong in having peace talks with Taliban in Pakistan?
Afghan Taliban are an indigenous force representing the Pashtuns of Afghanistan. They are freedom fighters. They are backed by the Afghan population. They are the majority in Afghanistan, and they have fought a war of resistance against a foreign occupation force. And TTP is an insurgent group supported by the hostile secret services fighting against the very state of Pakistan. You cannot equate just because their names seem to be Taliban and Taliban.
Zaid Hamid, we are running out of time, but I quickly want you to have a look at what Bilawal Zardari has to say, and then we will like to have your comment on that. Let's have a look at what Bilawal has to say.
I think we've exhausted the option of talks, and doors always, as part of our 3D policy, dialogue is always an option, but We have to have a position of strength. How do you talk from a position of strength? You have to beat them on the battlefield. They're fighting us. It's not only confined to North Waziristan. They're attacking us in Karachi, where we're heading the operation. We would like support from the Federation for that. We would like to eradicate the Taliban from Pakistan. Okay? The national consensus that we built has been squandered by politicians who use, oh, this is America's war, oh, this, that, you know, rowing around the issue, confusing the nation on purpose because they are scared, because they are cowards. And the fact of the matter is that, look, how long do you want to wait? I had thought that the assassination of my mother would finally wake this country up. Politics is a dirty, dangerous game. And I've seen my mother bury her brothers. The face of Pakistan should not be Osama bin Laden or the terrorists who murder us on a daily basis. It should be faced with those heroes who stand up to them and give this country hope. This country is full of hope, not fear.
Yes, Mr. Zaid Hamid, as you saw Bilawal saying that we will eradicate Taliban from Pakistan and that Pakistan is not the face of Osama bin Laden.
It's very funny coming from this lad whose family ran the biggest terrorist network in Pakistan, Al-Zulfiqar. In the 80s, the biggest terrorist group in Pakistan, which was waging a war against the very state of Pakistan like TTP is doing today, was run by his family, his uncle, his mother. Have we forgotten? Don't we have memory to remember what Al-Zulfiqar did? They hijacked planes, they did exactly the same bomb blasts, assassinations, terrorist hit, terror
But won't you give him a
Pakistan?
credit? Won't you give him a credit of this, that at least some political party has the guts to come out and say that we will eradicate Taliban from Pakistan?
You see, what happens is, if an idiot, even if he uses the right words, they actually bounce back, they actually come back on you. Coming from him actually does more damage because he is the face of liberal, anarchic, secular, godless, faithless ideology. That's what he's face of. And once he speaks against the TTP uses that statement to strengthen their stand. Look, if seculars and Western liberals like them are against us, which means we must be good Muslims. In fact, it becomes, because Pakistan is stuck between two fascist ideologies. One is liberal secularism and Westernism, other is religious, hardcore, anarchic, takfiri, fascism. So Pakistan, both elements are using each other to justify their existence. That's what Bilawal is. Bilawal represents the hardcore, leftist, secular, anarchic, liberal, secular values. So if he speaks against the TTP, that makes our job more difficult.
We're running out of time. I just want you to have a quick look on what Sartaj Aziz has to say about the peace talks with Taliban, and I would like to have your comment on that, real quick.
The government decided initially in consultation with all political parties to have a dialogue with the Taliban, but that is proving much more difficult. So the other option of using force for those who don't accept our writ, our constitution, our democratic system is likely to be now considered more seriously. As far as stakeholders are concerned, I was referring to our political parties because our political spectrum is very wide, from extreme right to then middle and the left. So unless they are on board of whatever action we want to take, then obviously people who are terrorists, no matter what their origin, are not stakeholders in that sense. So either they give up arms and accept the writ of the state, then they can survive somehow, otherwise they have to be dealt with by force. So I don't think whenever any operation begins, there is going to be no discrimination against this or that. It has to be a full-scale operation.
Yes, Mr. Zaid Hamid, you heard Sartaj Aziz mentioning that Taliban give up arms and then there won't be any problem. And the same thing Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif said, that the Taliban who are willing to give up arms, we are willing to have peace talks with them. Do you think Taliban will give up arms, their weapons?
You see, let me make it very clear. Ultimately, Pakistan army will have to go into North Waziristan to eliminate them. Ultimately, there will be a final battle with the TTP. But the point is, the cost will be 100 times more. Destroying them now is the time when they are the weakest, most vulnerable, when we have struck them so hard. Ultimately, the government will do what we are telling them to do. But only after lots of blood has flowed on the Pakistani street. And that is very painful. This government has betrayed Pakistan in its entirety. The coward leadership could not rise when they had to.
Thank you very much, Mr. Zaid Hamid. Viewers, as you saw, we discussed about the current scenario of this peace option getting explored once again. Definitely peace should be given a chance, but at the same time, all the other tactics should be considered in the plan as to what time-buying tactics could be used under the strategy of having peace talks. That's it for tonight. See you all next Sunday. Until then, Allah Hafiz and good night.